This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
So, welcome to Unsupervised Learning, another bonus monologue. We'll talk about some new findings that, maybe by the time you have listened to this, I will have finished the essays. So, obviously what I'm doing just for the long time subscribers to this podcast and to the Substack in general, where I also write long form essays, is that some people have told me they do not read the long form essays, though they feel guilty about it, but they do listen to the podcast. Obviously, I have done the podcast a little bit differently than the content in the essays. When I write, I try to write about the science and history stuff that I think I definitely provide a distinctive viewpoint and content that you can't find elsewhere. When it comes to the podcast, I do talk to all sorts of people. I talk to some scientists. I do some monologues sometimes, and but I talk about a lot of different topics that are unrelated to the history and genetics that you see in the writing. And I know that a lot of people, they come to the Substack for the history and the genetics, and I have gotten some feedback like, how about more history and genetics on the podcast? And sometimes I do that a fair amount, but look, there's only so many researchers I can talk to at any given interval, and so it can be a little difficult sometimes to source that. And then if I do really, really genetics heavy stuff, molecular genetics, like deep statistical genetics, that's not really what people are, candidly, what people are really looking for when I'm looking at the downloads, although I like that content myself, and I will still continue to do some of that stuff because I think that's important. And some people will get into that that otherwise would not be into that, and so I want to keep doing that. But I'm going to be doing some more bonus monologues because I think that if you don't read the essays, you can listen to this and get a lot out of them. And I think it's not that difficult for me, I guess. And there's a lot less information in these monologues than there is in the 5,000, 6,000 word essay. But you get the general gist and some of the interesting details, I think. So I'm going to keep trying to do this. So today I will be talking about the origins of the Finns, the Finnic peoples, and the Paleo-Germanic peoples, the Germanic peoples. Obviously, these two groups, I think you know who they are, but let me just reiterate. Finnic people are a subset of the Uralic peoples. Not all Uralic peoples are Finnic peoples. Uralic Altaic is a broader language group that, what might be real or might not be real. Altaic is mostly Turkic. Uralic is, like Finnic and some other groups like the Ugric. The Finno-Ugric is a subdivision within Uralic. In any case, the Finnic peoples are obviously the Finns. But then there's Estonians, the Sami. Further east, there's Karelians, there's Mordvins, there's Mariel, there's Udamerts, there's all these ethnic groups in northeast Russia. So it's not just the Finns, even though the Finns are the most numerous branch of them. In terms of Ugric peoples, there's a Khanty people, a small Siberian group, Central Siberia, and then there's the Hungarians. There's a lot of Hungarians. I'm not going to be talking about the Ugric people in this, but I think that that's an interesting topic, and I have talked extensively about the Ugric peoples in a post from a couple years ago that you probably know about. In any case, so let us talk about the Finns and the Germanics. And the Germanics, I think that's like straightforward. Nordic languages, German, and obviously English, which we're speaking right now. The origins of these two peoples, it turns out, are actually connected, and in kind of surprising way. And so I'm gonna basically have two different threads, two different findings that I am going to be reviewing. And the findings are from, a couple of papers. A couple of papers that were published recently are the preprints, and a paper from a couple of years ago, and I'll put them in the show notes. Okay, I'll put them in the show notes, but I'm just gonna summarize basically what's going on here. Uh, basically, the Germanic result is surprise. The Finnic result is kind of the conclusion of a long arc of thought and of research. And scholarship. Some of you who read my I think 5-part series on Finland, 5 or 6 parts from 3 years ago. It's been a while ago, but check it out. It doesn't really, what I'm going to say here does not overturn any of that stuff. It just clarifies, extends, and makes things more specific. Okay. So the Finnic puzzle is kind of solved. And why are Finns a puzzle? Well, because when you look at Finns, they look physically like Scandinavians. They're neighbors. They're not Scandinavians, though. A lot of people are surprised by this. Finns are Nordic people, but they're not Scandinavian because Scandinavians speak Scandinavian languages. Scandinavian languages are Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, and Icelandic. They're Indo-European languages. They're Germanic languages. Germanic languages of the north. Finnish is not a Germanic language. It's not a Scandinavian language. It's not an Indo-European language. Finnish is a Uralic language. It's it's the Finnic Ugric sub-branch, and Finnic is very, very distinct. And if you are ever in Finland, I have been in Finland, and you hear Swedish spoken, which you will because there is a Swedish minority, and you're an English speaker, you think you should understand Swedish. You strain, and that's it's a Germanic language, and there was a Scandinavian influence on Anglo-Saxon, anyways, but. It's because Swedish sounds so much more like English than Finnish does. Finnish sounds very, very exotic, very, very distinct. It's just quite clear, and it was quite clear to early philologists who study, ancient languages and whatnot, starting in the 19th century. And with the rise of, sorts of race science, race classification, there was a big issue with the Finns because they look substantially like their Scandinavian neighbors, like the Swedes, for example. Blonde, tall, blue-eyed, that sort of thing. But their language is very exotic, and it is actually more closely related to the language of the Samoyed tribes, like Nenets. There's all these sub-tribes. They live right east of the Urals, and early Finnish scholars and early anthropologists were wondering, okay, are the Samoyeds descended from Proto-Finnic, Finn-related people that went into Siberia and mixed with the Asians, and so they turned Asian, or are the Finns descended partly from Asian people that mixed with Northern Europeans, and that's why they look Northern European? Well, the answer to that is basically the second. They are original. The Finns were originally the Finnic, Proto-Finnic people, originally a people with Asiatic origins, who eventually landed the eastern shores of the Baltic, mixed with the indigenous Northern European people, and we'll talk about who those were later, and eventually, became genetically assimilated, but not culturally. Right? They kept their culture distinct, and even with the primitive tools of physical anthropology, looking at skulls, looking at colorings, and the gross morphology, it was already evident, even in the early 20th century, that some Finnish people look a little bit more Asiatic than the norm for, say, their Scandinavian neighbors. Not many, but some. And even among Scandinavians, some of them look kind of Asiatic. Like people like Björk. Björk is a pure Icelander. She's not Chinese, but she was made fun of being Chinese when she was a kid. But there are some Northern Europeans, Scandinavians in general, especially Scandinavians, Nordic people, that look Asian, that may have epicanthic folds even in rare cases. And so it's not totally unknown. And then if you look at the Sami, who are also called Lapps, they're the reindeer herders of the far north, and they look even more Asian-ish, East Asian, than do the Finns to their south. And so there are some arguments in the early 20th century that the Finns were, hybrid European Asian population. Some Finns embraced it, other Finns rejected it, and this also caused some tension, obviously, with National Socialism and the racial dynamics that were dominating Europe in let's say the first half of the 20th century, up until World War II. After that, obviously this stuff kind of went by the wayside. But I want to give you a little bit of context that the question of the Asian origin of the Finns has always been a big deal. Well, today we kind of know what's going on. So let's say about 25 years ago, there is Y-chromosomal studies that are looking at the paternal lineages. And one of the big surprises at these Y-chromosomal studies is that in northeastern Europe, in the eastern Baltic, the Y chromosomes are very, very different from elsewhere. So the Y chromosome that's dominant in Finland is a branch of haplogroup N. One of the, I think it's like N1C or N3A. They keep changing the nomenclature, so I'm just going to call it N because there's almost no other N in that region aside from of the Finns. Like there might be some like Tatar N in Poland or whatever, but usually it's the Finnic, N. And so this haplogroup N is carried by 60% of Finnish men. It's less than 10% in Scandinavia. And a lot of that 10% is probably Sami and Finns that were assimilated, right? It is found, though, an extensive belt across Northern Asia. And it reaches 80 to 95% among the Yakuts people. The Yakut people are the northeasternmost Turkic-speaking people in the world. And, they live in the region called Yakutia, I think the Sakha Republic. This is not in central Siberia. This is in eastern Siberia. It's not that far from the Pacific. It's pretty far east. And so you have this range of haplogroup N. And so the mutation that was defined in the early, more primitive, I guess, like phylogenetic analyses, it's called TAT-C. If you want to Google literature on that, TAT-C, the distribution of that is totally what they were focused on. And so N is found in Finns, it's found in Estonians, also found in Lithuanians and Latvians. A lot of them. In fact, it's more common. It's not as common in Lithuanians and Latvians as it is among Finns, but it is now more common, I think, than R1A, which is Indo-European cordware haplogroup. So Lithuanians and Latvians speak Baltic languages, so it indicates that some many Finnic men were integrated into Lithuanian and Latvian communities, which is not too surprising. Okay, so one thing you can do when you look at Y chromosomal lineages is try to figure out the distribution of their branching orders, which ones branched off first, which ones diversified relatively recently. And basically the takeaway was it was probably true that N is the Finnish branch of N is from Asia because it looks like, within Finland and Estonia, there's all these related branches of N that expanded demographically recently, whereas the deeper branches are further east. There's more, quote, diversity. Where there is usually more diversity is usually there's more time for those lineages to hang around in that area, develop mutations, and develop different variants. Whereas if there's less diversity, that means that it's a relatively recent demographic expansion in the area, and that would indicate that perhaps some new group migrated there. This is not dispositive. This is not determinative. This is just a correlation. It's the same correlation as you see the Y chromosomes with the worldwide, with Africans being more diverse and deeper basal branches, and then within Asia, West Asians are more diverse, see deeper basal branches. You can see the pattern here. The people in the New World tend to have Y chromosome Q overwhelmingly, and so why? Well, probably because they went through bottlenecks. So a series of bottlenecks will give you these patterns of reduced diversity. And so the hypothesis from N by 2010 was that the Finns are probably descended from an Asian people, just at least on the paternal lineage. And so one model that you have here is that it could be these Siberian males kept moving westward and kept mixing with the indigenous peoples, and eventually the indigenous peoples, whole genome ancestry became dominant. But if it's a paternal society, if it's a patrilineal society where there's higher status to these elite patrilineal groups of Finnic speakers from the east, you will still have selective pressures to keep the N haplogroup dominant, right? So you have haplogroup N. That's the first thing that you see. Second thing you see is their mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA, the maternal lineage. The Finns are basically their Scandinavian neighbors. So that indicates that the women did not come from Siberia. The there's a little bit more maternal lineage that's exotic among the Sami, but even there, it's overwhelmingly European, quote unquote. So you know, it's an interesting pattern for the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial, and that's like the first 10 years. Well, you start to have like whole genome analyses of the fins. So you're looking at population clustering on admixture plots and on PCAs. And one thing you immediately see is the fins are shifted toward these East Asians compared to other Northern Europeans. I have a friend and she's 1/4 genetically Finnish, and she has shifted outside of the cluster just because that 1/4. And so the reason that such a small proportion, because this is a small proportion of their ancestry, small proportion of their ancestry is East Asian, is East Asian ancestry is very genetically distinct. Because this is an ancestry that separated 40 to 50,000 years ago from the rest of their European ancestry. So even if it's like 10%, even if it's 5%, it is very, very distinctive, from the rest, and it creates like this shift away. It fins on these ancestry analyses, like on the principal component analysis, which is these scatter plots that you see. They tend to shift more towards Siberians, not Southern East Asians. That makes sense, right? That's what you would expect. In terms of whole genome ancestry, you would see percentages, on the order of, 5 to 10% East Asian, closer to 5% in the Finns. Estonians also Estonians are a little lower than Finns, and I think that's mostly because Estonians are in more contact with other Europeans, and so they have a little bit more admixture over time as their whole genomes are being mixed in with their neighbors, with their very, very numerous neighbors, right? So you see this ancestry in Finns and you don't see in other Europeans, or at least in the Western Europeans, in terms of haplogroup N, and the whole genome ancestry that's like clearly related to East Asians. And Finns also went through like a massive bottleneck. So you see these connections to East Asians. The best population when you do an admixture plot, so you have these out groups and you use them to reconstitute a new group. The best group, actually, like in a lot of the public data sets, are called Naganasans, who live in the central Siberian Taimyr Peninsula on the Arctic Ocean. They are often the best proxy for Finns, just so you know. We have these Northern East Asians. We already know this. That seem to have contributed to the Finnish genome. And so these Northern East Asians often have a lot of haplogroup N. And so, the coincidences are piling up. And the Uralic languages, the Finno-Ugric languages, Uralic languages are strongly correlated with haplogroup N and this Asian, particularly distinctive Siberian, Asian genetic cluster, right? And the Finnish percentage, if you look at the 1,000 genomes, I'm actually I decided just open it up and look at it. It's pretty low. It's like 5%, like maybe max 5%, of some sort of East Asian component, and the rest of it is very, very distinct Northern European stuff. In fact, if you look at the whole genome analyses, Finns often have less Neolithic ancestry than Swedes, Neolithic Anatolian ancestry. But there's some reasons for that. Maybe I'll get into that a little bit in the conversation. But in any case, over the last 5 years, ancient DNA, Northern Eurasia is very, very amenable to ancient DNA. Okay, so since Northern Eurasia is very, very amenable to ancient DNA, we have a lot of ancient DNA over thousands of years over many individuals. And what is quite clear now is that issues of cremation mean that there's some sampling issues with the Iron Age, with the East Baltic. Cremation became really popular, but not earlier. But it looks like the Finnic, the East Asian ancestry of the Finns does not show up until about 1000 BC at the earliest in Finland proper. Further east in the Kola Peninsula in Russia, right to the northeast, it was a little earlier. So it seems like they were in the interior of Northeast Europe, away from the coasts, maybe by the Middle Bronze Age, by 1500 BC, but they really didn't push hard into the coastal regions until about 1000 BC and after. And by about 500 BC, you see a lot of haplogroup N, and you see this New Siberian ancestry in places like Finland and Estonia. Well, at least in Estonia, you have a lot of samples. I don't think you have that many samples from Finland, but it seems around 500 BC, right? So where do they come from? Well, the haplogroup N, that branch of N, and this distinctive ancestry, East Asian Siberian ancestry, is because it comes from Yakutia actually. And Yakutia. So the Lena River across the Yakutia, northern bend of the Lena River. There was something called the Yamyakta culture, the Yamyakta culture. So it's very like, okay, I'm gonna spell it for you guys. It's super weird, like just so you know, Yamyaktakh, the Yamyakat, Yamyakatak culture, Yamyakatak, yeah. So the Yamyakatak, okay, I'm gonna say it that way. So this culture, it has basically the genetic ancestry that is the donor contribution to Finns of East Asians. Finns don't have Chinese ancestry. They don't have Vietnamese ancestry. They don't have Cambodian ancestry. They don't have Austronesian, Filipino ancestry. They have Siberian ancestry. They don't have Manchurian ancestry. They have Siberian ancestry that matches the Yamyaktak culture. Okay, this is Yakutian culture. Let's just call it Yakutian late Neolithic Bronze Age, which is actually what one of the Reich Lab papers that I'm going to link here call it. So this is a three-way mix of Paleo-Siberian plus 2 East Asian hunter-gatherer streams. So Paleo-Siberian is ancient North Eurasian. These are people that moved northward from West Asia about 40,000 years ago. They are more closely related to Western Europeans, Pleistocene hunter-gatherers, and West Asians, modern West Asians, than they are to East Asians. But they branched off so early that it's a very distant relationship, that they're actually, and also they have like a minority, very early on, a minority East Asian-like component in their ancestry. So they're shifted towards East Asians for that reason. So these people contribute about 30 to 40% of the ancestry of Native Americans. They went all the way almost to the Pacific coast. They were the first dominant, modern human population in Siberia. But later on, they were joined by other groups of East Asians, of people from modern Manchuria, Mongolia. Some of these, confusingly, are called Paleo-Siberians. And these Paleo-Siberians, these East Asian Paleo-Siberians, is actually the group that mixed, which ancient North Eurasians, creating. The ancient North Eurasians are the Paleo-Siberians. They mixed to create the Native Americans, who became Beringians, crossed over from Beringia, became Native Americans. Okay, so Native Americans are about 60% East Asian, 40% ancient North Eurasian, and so that's Paleo-Siberian and Paleo-Siberian, right? So that's that. Among the Yamyakat culture, okay, let's say the East Asian Finns, East Asian proto-Finns or Paleo-Finns, they have the Paleo-Siberian ancestry, but they also have 2 East Asian hunter-gatherer streams. So one of them is from kind of the coastal region towards the lower Amur Valley, like Manchuria, that area, Devil Gate sample, for those of you who are ancient DNA nerds. And then another one is from the interior towards Mongolia, okay? And so why are there 2 East Asian groups? Well, I mean, look.
Thank you for listening. To hear the rest of the monologue, please go to razib.substack.com and subscribe.
This podcast for kids